Handcuffed in the dirt and brutally framed, this grieving father doesn't beg for mercy. He just stares at the clock. They thought they arrested a disposable laborer. Instead, they unknowingly awakened a classified federal phantom with 22 minutes to destroy an empire and save his little girl. Imagine a man standing in the freezing dirt of a construction site, surrounded by people he bleeds alongside every single day, only to watch every last one of them take a cowardly step back as cold steel handcuffs violently bite into his wrists. He isn't thrashing against the police officers pulling his arms behind his back. He isn't screaming his innocence to the heavens or begging for mercy. Instead, as his reputation is publicly slaughtered and he is branded a thief, he is simply staring at a digital clock, his heart racing not from the terror of prison, but from the agonizing, breathless panic of breaking a promise to a 7-year-old girl waiting for him at the school gates. What would you do if your entire world was suddenly dismantled in exactly 60 seconds, and the only thing standing between you and absolute ruin was a highly classified secret permanently etched into your very flesh? Welcome to When Home Hurts 2, where we peel back the battered surface of everyday life to reveal the staggering, often heartbreaking truths hidden underneath. If you believe that real heroes do not demand applause, but instead carry the heavy, quiet burdens of sacrifice while the world ignores them, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel so we can keep bringing you stories that challenge everything you think you know about human nature. The merciless winds of Chicago howled through the skeletal steel framework of a new high-rise on Fifth Avenue, a brutal environment where the deafening symphony of jackhammers and shouting foremen drowned out any chance of quiet reflection. Right in the heart of this chaotic, unforgiving ecosystem stood Jake Miller. To the casual observer walking past the chain-link fence, Jake was utterly invisible. He was a masterclass in blending in, a quiet laborer swallowed up by a battered yellow hard hat and a denim jacket painted with heavy grease and concrete dust. I often wonder how many absolute titans of the human spirit we blindly push past on the sidewalk, reducing a person's entire, beautifully complex universe to the dirt under their fingernails. We see the sweat, the worn steel-toed boots, the sheer exhaustion, and we arrogantly assume we know their whole story. But beneath that thick layer of grime lived a fiercely loving, grieving heart. Jake was a widower, a single father whose entire existence had violently shrunk down to the size of his daughter Lily's smile after his wife passed away. Every agonizing swing of his hammer, every brutal lift of a steel beam that made his muscles scream in protest, was fueled by a folded, crayon-drawn picture of two stick figures kept safely in his chest pocket. He traded his physical pain for her future, accepting the isolating, cold indifference of his coworkers and his profit-driven boss with absolute, unbreakable dignity. But society has a profoundly cruel way of testing the foundations of our character when we least expect it. And Jake's quiet world of sacrifice was about to be torn apart by an orchestrated betrayal so deep it will leave your heart shattered before stitching it back together with the sheer, undeniable power of unspoken courage. That courage would be demanded of him precisely at 2:14 p.m. on a freezing Tuesday, when the wail of police sirens finally pierced the construction site's mechanical roar. The sudden appearance of flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the steel girders brought the entire crew to a dead halt. I can still picture the sickening betrayal unfolding as Marcus Vance, the site's billionaire developer with a smile as hollow as a cheap suit, pointed a manicured finger directly at Jake. Moments later, 3 armed officers were tearing through Jake's rusted locker, producing a canvas bag stuffed with missing company funds and classified architectural blueprints. items Jake had never seen before in his life. The sheer efficiency of the frame-up was breathtaking. Vance had recognized that Jake was quiet, isolated, and entirely expendable. He was the perfect scapegoat to bury Vance's own embezzling operation. I watched the men Jake shared his lunches with, the men whose heavy burdens he had literally helped shoulder, physically recoil. They took that cowardly, collective step backward, leaving Jake standing alone on an island of freezing dirt. When the cold steel of the handcuffs violently bit into his wrists, he didn't fight back. He didn't waste his breath screaming at the injustice of it all. Instead, his dark eyes locked onto the digital clock mounted inside the foreman's trailer. It read 2:38 p.m. Lily's school bell would ring in exactly 22 minutes. The realization hit him with the force of a wrecking ball, inducing a breathless panic that no physical threat ever could. For a man who had already lost his wife to a sudden illness, the promise that he would never, ever leave his daughter waiting alone on those school steps was a sacred vow. He knew that the child welfare system would eagerly snatch her up the moment a felony charge was officially filed against him. As the police roughly shoved him into the back of a freezing squad car, the brutal reality of his situation crystallized. His entire world was being dismantled, brick by brick, and the crushing weight of public humiliation threatened to drown him. But what the corrupt developer and the arresting officers failed to understand was that they had not cornered a helpless laborer. They had unknowingly awakened a sleeping giant, forcing Jake to finally weaponize the very past he had buried to protect his little girl. Yet, as the patrol car sped toward the downtown precinct, the terrifying ticking of that mental clock was abruptly eclipsed by a buried truth Jake had sworn never to resurrect. The interrogation room they tossed him into was deliberately suffocating, reeking of stale coffee and intimidation. Two veteran detectives leaned across the metal table, aggressively laying out the fabricated evidence that would supposedly lock him away for a decade. They expected tears, confessions, or the desperate bargaining of a broken man. Instead, Jake sat in absolute, unnerving silence. His mind wasn't in that room. It was calculating distances, traffic patterns, and the exact chain of command he needed to trigger. When the clock on the wall hit 2:48 p.m., leaving him 12 excruciating minutes, Jake finally spoke, his voice carrying an icy authority that made both detectives instinctively pull back. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He demanded a secure, encrypted line to the Department of Defense, citing a heavily classified clearance code that made the older detectives scoff in disbelief. To them, he was just a grimy bricklayer hallucinating under pressure. But Jake didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he rolled up the right sleeve of his grease-stained denim jacket, exposing a jagged patch of scar tissue on his forearm. With a firm press of his thumb, the supposedly dead flesh yielded, revealing a microscopic, embedded biometric transponder pulsing with a faint blue light. It was a permanent, painful branding earned during a highly classified military career that officially did not exist. Jake wasn't merely a laborer. He was a deep-cover operative inserted into Vance's construction empire by federal intelligence to dismantle a domestic terrorism funding ring hidden within the concrete pores of Chicago's newest skyscrapers. Vance had framed Jake precisely because Jake had been secretly downloading the syndicate's offshore routing numbers. The stolen blueprints in Jake's locker were actually planted to discredit him before he could blow the whistle. But by having Jake arrested and brought into a federal-linked precinct, Vance had unwittingly handed Jake the exact communication lifeline he needed. I can only imagine the sheer shock paralyzing those detectives as they scanned the transponder, watching their computer screens instantly lock down under the highest level of national security override. The exact moment that sequence was verified by Washington, the entire power dynamic in that suffocating room violently flipped, initiating a 60-second countdown to absolute ruin for the men who had framed him. The heavy metal door blew open, not with local cops, but with armed federal agents who immediately uncuffed Jake with quiet, almost reverent apologies. In the span of a single minute, arrest warrants were authorized for Marcus Vance and his entire executive board. The corrupt empire that had treated Jake like disposable trash was being completely dismantled, frozen, and seized. But Jake didn't stick around to gloat or watch his oppressors fall. He didn't care about the vindication or the sudden respect glowing in the eyes of the bewildered detectives. His eyes were glued to the clock. 2:56 p.m. He grabbed his battered hard hat and sprinted out of the precinct, his boots pounding against the icy pavement with a desperate, terrifying urgency. This is the profound difference between a Hollywood action star and a true, bleeding human being. The mission wasn't the victory. The mission was his daughter. He commandeered an idling federal SUV, weaving through the gridlocked Chicago streets with the precision of a man who had driven through active war zones, his heart slamming against his ribs. Every red light, every pedestrian crossing was a dagger to his chest. He was a highly trained phantom, capable of bringing down billion-dollar syndicates, yet he was completely paralyzed by the fear of his 7-year-old girl feeling abandoned for even a fraction of a second. As the school zone came into view, the final bell echoed through the freezing air, a sound that felt more deafening than any explosion he had ever survived. He abandoned the vehicle half on the curb, his steel-toed boots slipping on the sleet as he sprinted the final block, his lungs burning and his legs screaming in protest. When he finally crashed through those wrought-iron schoolyard gates, the shadows of federal espionage and the heavy burden of his classified secrets vanished, leaving only a desperate father searching a sea of children for his little girl. And there she was, sitting patiently on the icy stone bench, swinging her small, brightly booted feet. Lily looked up. Upon seeing him, her face erupted into a smile so pure and radiant, it instantly melted away the grime, the betrayal, and the agonizing terror of the past hour. She didn't see a falsely accused felon. She didn't see an undercover operative who had just orchestrated the takedown of a massive criminal syndicate. She just saw her dad, a little out of breath, wearing the same dirty jacket that smelled of concrete and hard work. Jake fell to his knees in the snow, wrapping his arms around her tiny frame, burying his face in her shoulder as a single, unseen tear tracked through the dust on his cheek. He had kept his promise. We are utterly obsessed with capes and loud, explosive heroics, but stories like Jake's force us to look deeper. True heroism is overwhelmingly silent. It is the agonizing choice to endure public humiliation, physical pain, and overwhelming isolation, all to protect the innocence of someone you love. It is walking back into the shadows when the world finally realizes your worth, simply because the only applause you will ever need is the laughter of your child on a cold winter afternoon. Jake Miller walked away from the construction site, forever disappearing from the public record, his duty fulfilled and his daughter safe. The next time you walk past someone whose hands are stained with the invisible labor of survival, remember that you might be standing in the presence of a giant. Thank you for walking this emotional journey with us at When Home Hurts Too. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it so we can continue to shine a light on the breathtaking, silent sacrifices happening all around us every single day. Jake's story is a profound reminder that the most extraordinary acts of heroism often masquerade as ordinary life. Framed by a corrupt billionaire and facing a decade in prison, Jake could have easily surrendered to the crushing weight of systemic injustice. Instead, he utilized his classified, deeply buried past not for vengeance, but to honor a sacred vow to his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. In the suffocating interrogation room, the revelation of his biometric transponder didn't just dismantle the domestic terrorism funding ring, it shattered the arrogant illusions of those who judged a man solely by his grease-stained jacket. Yet, the true climax of his journey wasn't the dramatic arrival of federal agents or the swift arrest of his oppressors. It was the agonizing, heart-pounding race through freezing, gridlocked streets to reach a schoolyard before the final bell. Jake's triumphant moment occurred in absolute silence on a snowy bench, completely divorced from the billion-dollar syndicate he had just destroyed. He eagerly traded the glory of a national security victory for the simple, unrecorded title of a dependable father. Ultimately, Jake Miller's journey strips away the cinematic glamour of espionage, grounding it in the visceral reality of parental love. It reveals that the most powerful force on Earth is not classified intelligence or federal authority, but the unwavering devotion of a parent determined to protect their child's innocence. The narrative immortalizes the quiet, invisible sacrifices made by everyday people who endure immense personal burdens just to keep their promises to the ones they love. True greatness does not seek an audience. The most profound heroism is overwhelmingly silent, rooted in the invisible sacrifices we make to protect and uplift the people we love. Furthermore, a person's external circumstances, their job, their clothes, or their perceived social standing are never an accurate measure of their capability, history, or character. Keep your sacred vows. Make your commitments to your loved ones non-negotiable. Whether it is showing up on time for a child's event or being emotionally present after a grueling workday, treat these daily promises with the exact same urgency you would give to your highest professional duties. Suspend judgment. Challenge your own biases when interacting with others. Treat the custodian, the laborer, and the executive with the exact same level of profound respect, recognizing that everyone is fighting hidden battles and carrying untold histories. Prioritize purpose over ego. When wronged or underestimated by others, focus on what truly matters rather than seeking public vindication. Let your ultimate purpose, your family, your values, your integrity, drive your actions, rather than a fleeting desire to prove your detractors wrong. Who is the unsung hero in your life that makes quiet, everyday sacrifices for you or your family? Please politely share your thoughts in the comments below so our community can read, discuss, and appreciate these incredible real-life heroes together. If Jake's emotional journey resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. Your support is exactly what gives us the motivation to continue producing and sharing these breathtaking, deeply human stories.